There are moments when a voice carries weight not because it is loud, but because it has lived. When a mother speaks after decades of watching her child grow through uncertainty, criticism, risk, and relentless work, her words do not feel like opinions. They feel like testimony. When Elon Musk's mother speaks out, people pause not because of celebrity, but because behind her calm presence is a lifetime of lessons about resilience, patience, dignity, and belief that was tested long before the world ever knew her son's name. She does not speak from the stage of sudden success. Her story begins much earlier, in years that were difficult, ordinary, and often invisible. She speaks as a woman who raised children while navigating hardship, instability, and judgment. She speaks as someone who understands that greatness is never born fully formed, and that struggle is not a detour from the path but often the path itself. That is why her words matter. They remind us that extraordinary outcomes are built on ordinary days where someone chooses not to quit. Listening to her, you realize that success is not just about intelligence or ambition. It is about endurance. It is about surviving seasons when nothing makes sense and continuing anyway. She has spoken openly about times when life was not glamorous, when resources were limited, when she had to rebuild herself while still being a source of strength for her children. There is no bitterness in her voice when she recalls those years. Only clarity. She understands that pain does not have to define you, but it can refine you if you allow it to. What stands out most is how she reframes struggle. She does not romanticize it, but she does not fear it either. She talks about difficulty as something to be faced, not avoided. That perspective alone is powerful in a world obsessed with shortcuts. She reminds us that resilience is not inherited, it is practiced. It is learned by watching someone get up again, by observing calm in chaos, by seeing that fear does not get the final word. She has often spoken about allowing her children to be themselves, even when their interests seemed unusual or impractical. There is a quiet wisdom in that. Instead of forcing conformity, she protected curiosity. Instead of demanding certainty, she allowed exploration. That kind of parenting requires courage, because it means trusting the long view. It means resisting the urge to control outcomes and choosing instead to nurture character. Her words highlight how rare and necessary the trust is. In her reflections, there is also a deep respect for work. Not fame, not applause, but work. She speaks about showing up, about consistency, about doing what needs to be done whether anyone notices or not. That lesson is timeless. It applies to dreams, relationships, healing, and self-respect. Work is not always glamorous, but it is honest. It builds foundations strong enough to carry unexpected weight later in life. She also challenges the idea that life must follow a neat timeline. Her own career flourished later than most people expect. She became a global figure in an industry that often worships youth, not because she chased approval, but because she refused to believe she was done. Her life itself is a statement that reinvention is possible at any age. That message lands deeply for anyone who feels behind, forgotten, or finished before they are ready. There is something grounding in the way she speaks about success without pedestal or entitlement. She does not claim credit for her children's achievements, nor does she distance herself from their struggles. She understands that love is not ownership. It is support. It is presence. It is believing in someone without needing to be proven right. That balance is rare and deeply instructive. Her words matter now because so many people are exhausted. They are tired of trying to keep up with impossible standards. They are tired of being told that if they are struggling, they are failing. She offers a different truth. She reminds us that struggling often means you are in motion. It means you are attempting something meaningful. Comfort rarely produces growth. Pressure, when met with integrity, often does. She speaks calmly, but her message is firm. Do not let rejection decide your worth. Do not let fear dictate your choices. Do not let comparison steal your joy. These are not slogans to her. They are conclusions drawn from lived experience. She has seen how easily the world dismisses people before they are ready. She has also seen how persistence can quietly outlast doubt. What makes her voice especially important is that it bridges generations. She speaks to young people who feel misunderstood and to older people who feel invisible. She reminds both that life does not owe explanations, but it does respond to effort. She shows that dignity is not loud. It is steady. It is the choice to move forward without needing permission. There is also compassion in her message. She acknowledges fear. She does not shame uncertainty. She understands that not everyone has the same starting point. That empathy gives her words credibility. She does not preach from comfort, she speaks from experience. And that difference is felt immediately. Her reflections invite us to examine how we define success. Is it speed, or is it sustainability? Is it recognition, or is it resilience? Is it winning early, or is it lasting? Through her story, success looks less like a single moment and more like a long commitment to becoming. She reminds us that belief from one person can change a life. Sometimes that person is a parent, sometimes a mentor, sometimes yourself. She speaks about encouragement not as empty praise, but as quiet faith during uncertain times. That kind of belief does not demand immediate results. It waits. It trusts. It stays. In a world that often reduces people to headlines, her voice restores depth. She brings attention back to values that cannot be measured easily: perseverance, humility, patience, self-respect. These qualities do not trend, but they endure. They are the roots beneath visible success. Her message is important because it challenges the myth that extraordinary people are untouched by hardship. She reminds us that behind every visible achievement is a private history of doubt, effort, and sacrifice. Knowing that does not diminish success, it humanizes it. It makes it reachable. She also speaks about responsibility, about using influence thoughtfully, about staying grounded even when the world is watching. That reminder matters in an age of instant platforms and fragile egos. Influence without grounding can distort. Success without humility can isolate. Her words gently steer us back to balance. Perhaps the most powerful thing she offers is permission. Permission to be different. Permission to start over. Permission to take your time. Permission to believe that your story is not over simply because it is difficult right now. That permission alone can lift weight from tired shoulders. When she speaks, it feels less like advice and more like reassurance. Not the kind that denies reality, but the kind that strengthens you to face it. She does not promise ease. She promises possibility. And sometimes, that is enough to keep going. Her voice matters because it reminds us that behind innovation are humans, behind ambition are families, behind success are sacrifices that rarely make headlines. She restores context in a world that often forgets it. In listening to her, you are reminded that you do not need to become famous to live a meaningful life. You need courage to stay true to yourself, discipline to keep working, and compassion to support others along the way. These are not extraordinary traits. They are available to anyone willing to practice them. She shows that strength can be gentle, that confidence can be quiet, that influence can come from integrity rather than volume. That lesson feels especially urgent now. Her words linger because they are not about one person's success. They are about human potential. They are about what happens when someone refuses to be defined by circumstances and chooses instead to respond with effort, learning, and belief. That is why when she speaks, it feels important. Not because of who her son is, but because of who she is. A witness to resilience. A voice of steadiness. A reminder that behind every leap forward is someone who once stood in uncertainty and chose not to step back, and perhaps that is the most inspiring part of all. She does not tell us to be fearless. She shows us how to move forward while carrying fear gently, without letting it lead. She reminds us that life does not require perfection, only persistence. In a time when many feel lost, rushed, or discouraged, her message lands like a quiet anchor. You may not control outcomes, but you can control effort. You may not be understood immediately, but you can remain committed. You may not see results today, but consistency compounds in ways that doubt cannot predict. That truth alone makes her voice worth listening to. She also speaks about something many people avoid admitting: loneliness. Not the dramatic kind, but the quiet loneliness of responsibility, of being the one who must hold things together when everything feels like it might fall apart. She understands that strength is often practiced in silence. When she reflects on those years, there is no performance in her words. There is honesty. She reminds us that carrying on without applause is not weakness, it is discipline. One of the most striking things about her perspective is how she separates self-worth from outcomes. She does not measure value by success alone. She talks about effort, integrity, and intention as achievements in themselves. That mindset is rare in a world that celebrates results but ignores process. Her voice reminds us that even when things do not work out as planned, the person you become while trying still matters. She often emphasizes the importance of not giving up on yourself, especially when others have already decided who you are or what you can become. She knows how limiting labels can be. She has seen how easily the world categorizes people and how difficult it can be to outgrow those assumptions. Her message is clear without being harsh: do not internalize other people's doubts. Borrow belief from wherever you can until your own becomes strong enough to stand alone. There is also a deep sense of realism in her words. She does not suggest that belief alone is enough. She talks about discipline, responsibility, and consequences. Dreams, she reminds us, are not fragile ideas to be protected from effort. They are commitments that require work. Passion without persistence fades. Talent without discipline stagnates. Her honesty makes her message trustworthy. She speaks about fear in a way that feels grounding rather than intimidating. Fear, to her, is not a stop sign. It is information. It tells you that something matters, that you are standing at the edge of growth. She does not encourage reckless bravery, but thoughtful courage. The kind that acknowledges risk and moves forward anyway. That distinction is important, especially for those who have been paralyzed by the pressure to be perfect before they begin. Another powerful thread in her reflections is patience. Not passive waiting, but active endurance. She understands that meaningful progress is often slow and uneven. She has lived long enough to see how quickly people dismiss paths that take time. Her words reassure those who feel unseen in the middle of their journey. You are not late, she seems to say. You are still becoming. She also challenges the idea that support must look a certain way. Sometimes support is not agreement, it is presence. It is allowing someone to struggle without rescuing them too quickly. It is trusting their ability to learn from difficulty. She shows that love does not always intervene. Sometimes it stands nearby and lets growth do its work. Her perspective on failure is especially important. She does not treat failure as an identity, but as an experience. Something that happens, not something you are. That subtle shift can change how people relate to their mistakes. Failure becomes a teacher rather than a verdict. It becomes part of the story, not the end of it. She also speaks about humility, not as self-denial, but as clarity. Knowing what you do not know. Being willing to learn. Staying open even after success arrives. She understands how quickly arrogance can isolate and how grounding humility can be. Her words quietly remind us that growth does not stop when goals are reached. It simply changes form. There is a quiet confidence in the way she carries herself, one that does not seek validation. It comes from surviving enough to know that opinions pass, trends fade, and character remains. That confidence is deeply reassuring for anyone who feels shaken by criticism or rejection. She has lived proof that being underestimated does not disqualify you, it often prepares you. She also talks about responsibility toward oneself. About taking care of your health, your mind, your dignity. Success, she implies, is hollow if it costs you your well-being. That reminder feels especially necessary in a culture that glorifies burnout. She shows that longevity, not intensity alone, is what sustains meaningful work. Her words invite reflection rather than reaction. They slow you down. They encourage you to look at your own life with honesty instead of judgment. Where are you rushing? Where are you giving up too soon? Where are you stronger than you realize? She does not answer these questions for you. She simply creates space for them to exist. Perhaps what makes her message resonate so deeply is that it is not aspirational in a distant way. It is practical. It applies to ordinary lives, quiet struggles, unseen efforts. You do not need to change the world to live with purpose. You need to stay committed to your values, even when the outcome is uncertain. She reminds us that influence does not always come from power. Sometimes it comes from consistency. From being someone others can rely on. From modeling resilience rather than preaching it. Her life, in that sense, becomes the message. In listening to her, you begin to understand that success is not just about reaching somewhere. It is about who you are willing to become along the way. It is about staying honest with yourself when shortcuts tempt you. It is about choosing growth over comfort again and again. Her voice matters because it cuts through noise without competing with it. It does not shout. It does not exaggerate. It simply speaks truth shaped by time. And time, more than anything, gives her words weight. She reminds us that life rarely unfolds according to plan. But it can still unfold with meaning. That setbacks do not erase potential. That belief, sustained long enough, can quietly change the trajectory of a life, and as she speaks, you realize something important. Inspiration does not always come from those who stand at the finish line. Sometimes it comes from those who walked beside the journey, who endured the uncertainty, who believed before there was evidence. That is why her voice stays with you. It does not demand attention. It earns it. She also brings attention to something rarely discussed when success stories are told: the cost of misunderstanding. Long before recognition arrives, there are years when choices look irrational to others. She understands how painful it can be to follow a path that does not fit familiar templates. Her words offer comfort to those who feel constantly questioned, who are tired of explaining dreams that do not translate easily. You do not need universal approval to move forward. You need inner alignment. There is a gentleness in how she speaks about mistakes, especially her own. She does not present herself as flawless or all-knowing. She acknowledges learning in real time, adjusting, adapting, growing alongside her children rather than above them. That humility adds depth to her message. It reminds us that guidance does not require perfection, only sincerity. She often emphasizes self-reliance. Not as isolation, but as responsibility. Depending entirely on external validation is fragile. She encourages building an internal compass, one that can steady you when praise disappears or criticism grows loud. That internal strength becomes a quiet form of freedom. Another theme that runs through her words is gratitude, not the performative kind, but a grounded appreciation for effort, opportunity, and survival. She recognizes how easily people overlook what they have while chasing what they want. Gratitude, in her view, does not reduce ambition. It stabilizes it. It prevents success from turning hollow. She speaks with clarity about the difference between confidence and entitlement. Confidence is earned through effort and learning. Entitlement demands reward without growth. Her distinction matters in a culture that sometimes blurs the two. She reminds us that believing in yourself also means being willing to improve yourself. There is also an unspoken lesson in how she handles attention. She does not chase it, yet she does not hide from it either. She understands that visibility can be used responsibly or wastefully. Her choice to speak with purpose rather than provocation is itself a message. It shows that influence can be exercised without feeding ego. She acknowledges the role of luck and timing without diminishing the role of preparation. She understands that opportunity often arrives unexpectedly, but it favors those who are ready. That balance between humility and agency makes her perspective realistic and empowering at the same time. Her reflections on independence are particularly striking. She does not equate independence with doing everything alone. She sees it as the ability to stand on your own values while remaining open to support. That nuanced view challenges extremes and encourages healthier forms of strength. She also speaks about dignity in adversity. About refusing to let hardship harden you or strip you of kindness. She has lived through seasons where bitterness would have been an easy refuge. Instead, she chose composure. That choice, repeated over time, becomes character. Her words carry reassurance for those who feel overshadowed by someone else's success. She understands that comparison can quietly erode self-worth. She reminds us that proximity to greatness does not diminish individual value. Every life has its own measure of meaning. There is an understated but powerful lesson in how she treats time. She respects it. She does not rush to prove herself, nor does she delay necessary action. She understands when to wait and when to move. That discernment comes from experience, and it shows. She also challenges the idea that ambition must come at the expense of compassion. She shows that it is possible to pursue big goals without losing humanity. That reminder feels essential in an era where intensity is often mistaken for importance. Her message resonates because it does not ask you to become someone else. It asks you to become more fully yourself. To refine your strengths. To accept your limits. To keep learning. That approach feels sustainable, not exhausting. She speaks about hope not as optimism detached from reality, but as a commitment to keep trying despite uncertainty. Hope, in her words, is active. It shows up in daily choices, in small acts of persistence, in refusing to give up on long-term visions. Listening to her, you sense a deep understanding that life is layered. That people are complex. That outcomes are influenced by factors both seen and unseen. This awareness keeps her from judgment and invites empathy instead. Her voice matters because it reminds us that wisdom does not always come from those who chase the spotlight. Sometimes it comes from those who have lived long enough to see patterns, to recognize what endures and what fades. She does not offer guarantees. She offers grounding. And in uncertain times, grounding can be more valuable than promises. She leaves you with the sense that meaning is not found only in triumph, but in persistence. Not only in recognition, but in self-respect. Not only in arrival, but in continuation. That is why her words feel important. They do not push you forward with pressure. They steady you so you can keep going. She ultimately leaves us with a quiet but profound understanding. Life is not a performance to be perfected, but a journey to be endured with honesty. She does not encourage chasing applause or proving anything to the world. She encourages building a life that you can stand behind when no one is watching. That idea alone carries immense freedom. Her reflections bring attention back to responsibility of thought. What you tell yourself in private matters. The stories you repeat internally shape the limits you accept externally. She speaks about choosing language that strengthens rather than diminishes, about refusing to rehearse failure as destiny. This is not denial, it is discipline of the mind. She also emphasizes continuity. Progress is rarely dramatic. It is a series of small decisions made consistently. She understands how tempting it is to quit when results are slow. Her life stands as evidence that consistency compounds quietly, often revealing its impact much later than expected. There is also a deep respect in her words for individuality. She does not suggest copying anyone's path, not even her own. She understands that comparison distorts purpose. Your circumstances, abilities, and responsibilities are uniquely yours. Meaning comes from honoring that reality, not escaping it. She reminds us that love, when healthy, does not demand sacrifice of identity. Support does not mean self-erasure. Belief in another does not require abandoning yourself. That balance is subtle but essential. Especially for those who give too much and forget to remain whole, her voice carries the assurance that setbacks do not cancel destiny. They clarify it. They force refinement. They teach resilience. What feels like delay often becomes preparation. What feels like loss often becomes redirection. She also speaks, sometimes indirectly, about grace. Not religious or abstract, but human grace. The grace to forgive yourself. The grace to keep compassion alive when circumstances harden others. The grace to accept imperfection without surrendering effort. In her message, age becomes irrelevant. Timing becomes flexible. The pressure to arrive by a certain moment dissolves. Life opens up again. Possibility returns. That release from urgency is itself healing. She leaves us with the understanding that strength is not proven by how much you can carry, but by how wisely you choose what to carry. Not every burden is yours. Not every expectation deserves your energy. Discernment becomes a form of self-respect. Her words also remind us that legacy is not built only through achievements, but through influence of character. The way you treat people. The steadiness you offer in chaos. the example you set without announcing it. These things ripple outward in ways you may never see. There is no grand conclusion in her message, no dramatic crescendo. And that is precisely why it feels true. Life rarely resolves itself in perfect endings. It continues. It evolves. It asks you to keep showing up with integrity. She does not promise ease. She promises meaning. She does not guarantee success. She offers resilience. She does not eliminate fear. She teaches how to live alongside it without surrendering direction. In the end, her voice matters not because it explains greatness, but because it humanizes it. It reminds us that behind ambition is vulnerability, behind achievement is endurance, behind progress is patience, and perhaps the most important reminder of all is this: you are not required to become extraordinary to live a worthy life. You are required only to remain honest, persistent, and kind to yourself as you move forward. That is why when she speaks, it feels important. Because her words do not elevate her above us. They meet us where we are, steady our footing, and quietly remind us that continuing is already an act of courage.